Hey friends, welcome to the Kidsman Collective podcast. I'm Lauren Ralston, your host, and today's episode is called Why Background Checks Are Not Optional, They're Essential. So in this episode, we're going to get real about background checks. If you don't have a process in place yet, it's time. So we're going to talk about why background checks are non-negotiable for your kids ministry leaders and why they protect more than just the kids. So bottom line is intuition about a person is not just enough. You need some facts in that as well. So let's jump right in. Why are background checks a must? First of all, you can't know everything about a person by just simply meeting them, right? Like we all have friends that we've known for years and they say something and you're like, I didn't know that, right? So that's people that we know well, that we do life with, even sometimes family. I've done that with my husband. Like, I didn't know that about you. I didn't know you liked that or didn't like that thing. So we are constantly learning about people, right? And so if you have somebody who shows up and says, I want to serve in kids ministry, you're not going to know enough about them in that split second or that split moment to know whether or not they have the ability to serve or to not serve in ministry. So just consider that you can't know everything about them with just a single time meeting them, right? So they're just a little example of what this looks like. Overall, I feel like I do have a pretty good intuition about people, and I tend to have a gut feeling if there's something that I should be concerned about. And there was a couple they had kids in my kids ministry area, and I kept seeing them and I kept thinking, oh man, this couple would be great to serve in ministry. I think I should ask them. And for some reason, it took me a while to get on board with that, right? Like I didn't ever ask them, which was totally from the Lord. But it turned out that I never got a weird gut feeling or concern about this couple. And it turns out somehow it came out later that this dad actually had a history of sexual abuse involving minors. And I was ready to ask them to jump in and start serving and like be these key leaders in my ministry. And I never had a gut feeling when I normally have a gut feeling. And so that is a prime example of you don't know somebody. We can't make snap judgments, right? Like we can't just say, gut feeling, don't like this person, absolutely no. Like you can't just have those snap judgments, but we do need to listen to those feelings that we get. And we need to understand that you're not always going to have a feeling. Again, I feel like I often have a gut feeling about that stuff and I just simply didn't. And so that was a check in my spirit to say, okay, like that's why we have a system in place for background checks, why these are important. Had he done that, had I asked him to serve, that would have come up. So just be aware of that. Even the best discernment can't replace that verified information. So background checks are necessary so you can find out if there's a risk for putting those people in your classrooms or around your kids. So consider those pieces of it. But who does a background check protect? Why does that matter? First of all, if you background check any adult, which is my recommendation, anybody over the age of 18 who is working with children under the age of 18 should have a background check. I also highly recommend some kind of background screening for student leaders, but you cannot do, if they're minors, you're not legally allowed to run a background check for information to be released to you if they're a minor. So you can't get any kind of legal background check on a minor. So do some kind of a screening. Typically that would involve references, right? Do they have a teacher? Do they have somebody they babysit for? Is there somebody who can be a reference for them? So doing some kind of screening for students, and then anybody over the age of 18 should be legally background checked with their social security number through a legitimate background checking agency. There are several options you can find online. Ask around to other kids ministries or local churches. There's often some like local organizations that can do that. So figuring out where you can go to get legitimate background checks done. So when you have these background checks in place, it's first and foremost going to protect the children of your ministry. By doing a background check, we are not going to put somebody who would be at risk of harming that child in a classroom. So it is setting up the classroom for success and protecting the kids that would be in there. So that's kind of that first layer that obviously we want to protect those children. Children are the vulnerable ones. They're the ones who cannot always advocate for themselves or speak up for themselves. If you have young kids in early childhood ministry, sometimes they can't even speak for themselves. So how do we make sure we're setting up safeguards to protect those kids? And background checks is the first layer of that. Our number one job is to protect the kids in our ministry. So we have to be having safeguards and boundaries and things up in place that will help us to do that well. That is a legal way we can do that, where we can run legal background checks. You have to make sure that your volunteers are signing a disclosure that they know that that's happening. Obviously, they're going to have a safe way to upload a social security number. There's lots of logistics in that, but that we can talk about another time. But first and foremost, that these background checks are protecting the kids of your ministry. Second of all, background checks are going to protect your ministry both legally and ethically. So if you are background checking adults before you are putting them into a classroom, you are going to help yourself legally by not putting people who shouldn't be in a classroom, but also ethically. Like, there are morals that you should abide by in that, and those are going to help you determine whether or not somebody is fit to be in a classroom or fit to serve with children. So these are going to help protect the ministry as a whole. It is also going to protect the person who has a record. So I want to call out something here that it's a hard thing in the Christian church, because we want to be very careful about people who have any kind of a sexual criminal record or something that is going to make them unfit or unsafe to work with children. We do not want them in our classrooms. And obviously, background checks they're going to be that first layer of that, right? So the person who is off the street that says, I'm creepy and I want to come work with children's ministry, isn't going to get into the ministry because their record shows that, right? So we're going to prevent those kind of weird, random, scary kind of situations. But also, we have to remember on the flip side that we are Christians. We believe in the redeeming power of the Holy Spirit to work in people's lives, that somebody who has a criminal record can be redeemed from that sin and that record of their past. Does that mean that we let them into the classroom? Probably not. I highly recommend not doing that. It's going to have to be a very unique situation for you to make that exception to that rule. Partly, we want to be protective of that person. I truly believe in the transforming power of the Lord to change somebody's heart, to fully redeem them. And I think somebody who has a sexual criminal past can, in fact, be in a place later in their life where they are completely redeemed by the Lord and they would be fit and just fine to be in a classroom. But in order to protect that individual, I would not put them in a room, because if a parent were to catch wind of that somehow, and something happened in your ministry or happened in the classroom, who's the first person that could get blamed for that? When it maybe was never that person, And so we want to make sure we're protecting the person who has a record as well, so that they are not put in situations that can hurt their testimony or their reputation if they're completely innocent. So it is a fine line, and I get that this is a complex situation and a complex topic. So it's not all black and white. It is hard, but I would overall, as a general rule of thumb, I would not let somebody who has a criminal sexual record in their past serve in a kids ministry classroom. I would also highly recommend that you have these conversations with leadership at your church, that if you have HR, communicate with those those individuals to help them train you on what those protocols should be within your ministry. If you have questions, also I recommend connecting with other local churches. What are the things that they put into place? What are their protocols? There's definitely groups online where you can ask those questions, but finding out what some other churches are doing in that space as well. So, the last piece that we want to talk about is some of the common pushbacks that I hear when people say that they can't do a background check, why they can't do it. Often I hear people say, well, this person doesn't need a background check. They're a really nice person. But that, first of all, that is the attitude that can get you into trouble. That is not the case with every time you say that. I'm sure that they are nice people, but those are the situations if you are so trusting that you say, this person is nice, I think they're going to be great in a classroom, and you put them in a room and they actually have a criminal record that shouldn't allow them to be working with children, that's a concern. That's an issue. So, how do we avoid that as a whole? We make it a blanket that you can think about this like there are restaurants that if you purchase alcohol, they don't care if you are 12 and you're trying to buy alcohol or you're 98 and you're trying to buy alcohol. They card every single person, even if they know you are above 21. Obviously, a 98-year-old is not 21 years old, so they card everybody as the blanket rule. And that's the same thing. If you are serving with any child under the age of 18, every single person gets background check if you're 18 years old or above. And that's the blanket rule. We just do that. There's no exceptions to that, whether they're a nice person, whether I knew them from 12 years ago or not. Everybody needs a background check. Another common thing that I hear as a pushback is that background checks are too expensive. I get that there is a cost to that and that sometimes that is hard to swallow and it is hard to swing. However, the cost of one incident that occurs in your ministry is going to be far worse than what you would pay if you were paying for background checks. The background checks are preventative to help you not have an incident. And so this is the foundational way to help you create a space where you do not have an incident at all. And so not that you would never have an incident just because you do background checks, but this is a starting point for that to help you create a foundation that helps you on the legal side of things and helps you avoid a super expensive incident that you have to handle with insurances, that you have to handle with legal fees, all of the pieces involved in. Sometimes medical, like there's a lot of pieces. So if you say that a background check is too expensive, weigh that in consideration to the cost of whether or not you'd have an incident. And I'm just talking physical money. If you had an incident, there's going to be way bigger repercussions besides just a bill at the end of the day. You are going to have hurt families. You're going to have trust issues within the ministry. You're going to have trust issues within the church, probably with leadership. Like there's a lot of repercussions to that. So investing in background checks is actually not too expensive, and I highly recommend that you start with that. Another thing that I have heard people say, and this one is really hard for me to swallow and really hard, this is the concerning piece for me, is we're a really small church, so we don't need to background check. We know people. But just like I suggested at the beginning of this, I am still learning things about my husband that I'm like, I didn't know that about you. So there's things that come out over time of like, oh, my best friend just told me that they don't like this thing or they do like this thing, or my husband just shared that. Like I'm still learning about those people that I'm close to and I do life with consistently. And so if I'm still learning about those people, how much more am I still learning about people that I only see once a week or I only know from in passing at church, or who look like this cute old lady that's always at church? Or, there are things we don't know about these people, and we can't know all of those things. And so background checks become a place where we can start to create a safe space for our kids. And I think small churches, we tend to overlook the fact that there could be something underlying that we don't know about. and a past or a history that's something that is not appropriate for these people to serve in ministries with our churches. With our kids. So just consider those things as you're processing through whether or not you want to do background checks at your church. Background checks for me are a non-negotiable. You've got to get those set up for your church. It is super, super important because it is a foundational piece of how you can set up a safe environment for your kids, for yourself as a ministry leader and director, for the church as a whole, and to help prevent incidents before they could ever occur. And so these things are not to instill fear. They're not to make you upset or to concern you, but really they are preventative measures to put into place for protection. It's about faithfulness to ministering to and loving your families and your kids well, and making sure that you are setting up a space that you're doing that. So if you want to talk through background checks, what that looks like for your church, how you can implement that, strategies around that, I would love to talk with you about that. Let's hop on a quick call. You can access my calendar on the homepage of my website, ozarkministryconsulting.com, or you can find it in the description of this podcast, and I would love to connect with you. Let's talk strategy about your procedures, your protocols, background checks, how to implement them. I hope you have a great week, and I look forward to hearing from you soon. Thanks for joining me today on the Kidsmen Collective podcast, where we're all about nurturing leaders and impacting generations. Before you go, I want to invite you to take the next step in growing your ministry with confidence. I've created a free Kidsmen Leader Assessment designed just for leaders like you. It walks you through the 5 key areas: purpose, people, programming, physical space, and procedures, helping you celebrate what's going well and uncover where there's room to grow. Whether you're a brand new leader or you've been leading for years, this tool will give you a clear picture of where your ministry stands and where it could go with a little strategy and support. Head over to ozarkministryconsulting.com to get started. You'll find the assessment right on the homepage, quick, simple, and packed with insight. And if this episode encouraged you, share it with a fellow leader or leave a review. We're better when we grow together. Until next time, keep leading well, keep loving big, and remember, your ministry matters.